On October 22nd in 1989, Jacob Wetterling along with two other boys were returning home down a scarcely traveled road to watch a rented movie when a man in a mask came out of nowhere and took Jacob. Only 30 years later was he found, well, what was left. So, what could happen to you if you take that old back road? You're watching Darkness Prevails, the best channel to share your creepy stories with the world, because this world is a strange one. Many of us have those old dirt roads or backwoods trails that you'd rather avoid. That road that no one ever goes on and is said to be haunted. Well, today we go down that road with these 5 allegedly true scary back road stories. You can have your story narrated on this channel. Just go to darknessprevails.org/submit. I'm currently looking for stories about sewers, firewatch, and scary bosses. Now then, prepare yourself. You might just disappear for good. Number 1. The Branch in the Road. Submitted by Robert L. I live in a fairly populated city in the eastern US. I would consider myself to be a night owl, and it's gotten me into trouble more times than I can count. Now, when I say trouble, I don't mean not getting enough sleep before an important exam, or anything along those lines. I mean the times where I actually place myself into potential danger. This is what I'll be focusing on. More specifically, I'm talking about an event which happened a few nights ago, as of writing this. It was 1:30 a.m., and I had just come off of a migraine that I was suffering through. I had lain in bed all day, and I finally wanted to get up and do something. So I decided I'd go out for a drive. I took a quick shower, then went out to my car. I wasn't really sure where it was I was going to go. I just started up my music and started leaving my subdivision. I got out onto the main road and decided I would drive to a place fairly close that I hadn't been to before. I knew that it had some hills and figured it would be a fairly entertaining night drive. I turned onto a road I knew fairly well and figured I would drive north to an area less populated. I guess you could consider it a country area. The houses were all spread out, and there weren't many stores, gas stations, etc. Once I got 3 miles beyond the part of the road I knew, I stopped at a dusty and barren 4-way stop. I checked my surroundings and proceeded. Because it was dark, I didn't realize until I pulled onto it. The road had turned into a dirt road, no longer paved. At this point, the forest was pretty heavy as well. The road was fairly wide, consisting of what seemed to be 3 lanes. I assume this was because there were lots of driveways, which were not too safe to pull into because of the hills. The second it turned to dirt, I decided it was a better idea to turn around a little further up, as I was no longer comfortable driving this road. Before long, I came across a large branch in the road, which I wasn't able to drive around. So I stopped my car about 15 feet away from it. This immediately seemed strange to me, because it wasn't windy at all. The odds of a branch falling were very low, not to mention it also looked very unnatural, more as if it had been laid there precisely, rather than having fallen directly downwards. Furthermore, it seemed as if the branch had been dead for quite a while now. The leaves looked dry and the branch looked rotted. It just seemed as if it didn't belong there. Because I've heard many stories about this type of thing being a trap, I was on edge right away. Within seconds of looking the branch over, I shifted into reverse and quickly turned around. While I still had my foot on the brake before shifting into drive, the red light illuminated the area behind me. I looked into the mirror one last time before driving away, and that's when I saw them. 2 people began climbing out of the forest on each side of the branch. They were both wearing dark clothes, and I believe they had white masks on. It was either this or that both of them were very, very pale. I don't know for sure, as I only saw them for a moment. as, in my horror, I slammed my foot on the gas and quickly drove back down the dirt road. I don't know what those people planned to do, but obviously they did not have good intentions. They probably placed the branch there, expecting someone to get out of their car to move it out of the way, and that would be when they'd strike. Think of what would have happened if I lived further down the road. I would have had to move it to proceed, to get home. I didn't call the police because I figured they would have left after I sped away. The police would have shown up to see nothing out of the ordinary, and then I would be in the spotlight for a fake report. While I was fortunate, someone else may not have been. I want to turn this into an example, so just remember, act with caution when getting out of your car at night. There are people in this world with evil intentions. While something may seem like a natural occurrence, it may not be. You can't assume, oh, that would never happen to me, just because the odds are low. I never expected something like this would happen to me, but in all honesty, it could happen to anyone. Be mindful of this. You never know what danger is waiting for you, even in something as simple as getting out of your car to move a branch out of the way. Number 2. Curiosity, submitted by Meme Queen 2K18. I live in a small town in the state of Georgia of about 30,000 people. Crime isn't too bad for the area that I live in, which is why I'm still shook that this even happened. I live a mile away from my high school, so when my mom had to borrow my car that day, I really didn't mind the walk home. There's an old back road that runs along the back of the houses and a train track. It's a dirt road that leads about half a mile and all the way back to the main road where my house was. Then I can cross the road and get to my place. I take this route because there's hardly any cars that take the road, so it's quiet. Or so I thought. The event happened in November of 2017. I was walking home. It was a warm day, and I was jamming to some music and whatnot for the majority of the walk. About 15 or 20 minutes into it, I had to walk over the train tracks and onto this dirt road. Not even 5 minutes into my walk, I see a car with its emergency lights blinking, and all the car doors are open on the side of the dirt road. It was old, brown, and beat up, and it was a Lincoln. I slowed down my pace to a walk, and I examined this situation more carefully. I thought it was unusual because stuff like this never happened on my walks before. Okay, maybe they have a flat tire, or maybe someone got car sick, I thought. But something told me not to take another step forward. That's when I realized something was off. If they were in trouble or needed help, then why would someone try to get help and pull over on a desolate, empty road? And where were they now? Of course, being the curious and slightly nosy person I was, I decided to hide in the shrubbery and bamboo trees to find out. I got as close to the car as I could without making a sound. I waited to see what was going to happen while keeping a safe distance. There were no flat tires, no blood or vomit, no bodies so far. Actually, there was no one in sight. I got bored and wanted to go home. I was going to just make a run for home base, when suddenly, 2 men came out from behind the trees. They had been hiding. Right away, they looked like absolute white trash. One was big, around 6 feet tall, and the other was lean, starved looking, and looked like he was on drugs who came to about 5'10". I don't think they saw me just yet, because they were talking amongst themselves rather loud. "You didn't see that little girl anywhere?" said one of them. "Nah, that's too bad. Better luck next time. She's a fine thing, that one," said the other. They laughed and talked, and the second guy said, "Wait here for a few." "I guess it wouldn't hurt," said the first. "Alright, I'm noping out of here," I said to myself. The way they said, a little girl, made me gag. I had a good 18 feet head start, and I could make it to the woods, to someone's backyard, then onto the main road in 2 minutes flat. I'm 5'4" and roughly 165 pounds, and I don't get scared too easily. I could maybe get away with roughing up the hungry-looking one, but I was outnumbered and easily overpowered. That's when I just booked it right out of there. I think that was the fastest I'd ever run in my life, while also having my book bag on me. It felt like a boulder strapped on my back, and it was slowing me down a bit, but the thought of being kidnapped and never seen or heard from again kept me going at full speed. I knew they saw me. I could hear their footsteps running behind me from the underbrush. They were getting closer by the second, but I could see and hear cars, and I knew it'd be seconds until I got to the road. When I got to the road, I didn't even look back to check if they were behind me. I just kept running until I knew I was home safe. Thankfully, I did make it home without anyone getting to me, or following me, I hope. I think that was the longest 2 minutes of running in my life. I could hardly breathe, and I was drenched in sweat. I locked all of the doors and windows, and I sat in my living room trying to let what happened settle in. Needless to say, I took a very long, much-needed shower and a nap that day. So, whenever I see an abandoned car pulled over to the side of the road, you bet I'm steering clear and getting away as far as possible from it. I have no idea what those 2 men wanted with me, but I really don't want to know. Speaking of whom, to the 2 creepy, ratchet, redneck abductors, you better pray I'm not carrying something to protect me if I ever see you 2 again. Number 3. Creature on our paper route. Submitted by Alyssa W. The story takes place in Washington State, in the city of Vancouver. In 2004, I was a freshman in high school. At the time, my mother had a paper route for the Columbian newspaper. It was a long route that had us going to upper-class neighborhoods, as well as more rural areas in the outskirts of the city. It took from 3 a.m. to around 5 p.m. to finish. That night began like any other. We loaded our papers into the van and we headed out. The way the route was planned, we would start with the inner city, then work our way outwards. We were getting to the section of the route that made my mother the most nervous. You guessed it, it was an old, seemingly abandoned dirt road with a dense forest on either side, and the only lights were the ones coming from our van. We had to drive slow here due to the dirt having been turned to mud from the recent rain, when suddenly something hopped out into the road in front of us. Now, I grew up in Northern California. I've seen coyote, bears, deer, foxes, and even mountain lions, but this was weird. This was different. The only way I can describe it was a sick or mutated kangaroo. Its head and snout were short like a hyena. Its body was thin with dark, rough skin and tufts of grayish fur in random places. It had longer back legs than its front legs, and its spine was protruding unnaturally. It had large teeth and dog-like paws with long fingers and toes. Yes, fingers. The thing hopped in front of our van, stopped, and looked right at my mother. Then it got low to the ground for a moment, then bounced away on its massive back legs. I remember my mother just sitting there, not able to speak for a moment. Then, when it bounced away, she turned to me and asked if I saw that, to which I admitted I did. We went on with the route, not saying too much else. I don't think she was scared, just in awe. She believes we saw a chupacabra, but I'm not totally sure what it was. All I can say is that I'm glad we were inside the car. Number 4. Stalked by a Dogman. Submitted by Nicholas. It all happened when I was 22. I was living with my dad at the time, back home in Oklahoma, out in the town of Tribby, off a road. Believe it or not, that road so happened to be called Slaughterville Road. I had some friends, well, more precisely, a friend who lived in town, and another friend who lived down a long dirt road not far away. We'll call them James and Randy. James being the one who lived with his grandmother in town, and Randy being the one who lived a bit further out. Well, me and these guys, we decided this night would be a good night to just hang at James's place and drink some beer all night, then crash on the couches later. This would be where my story would end if I hadn't decided I didn't want to sleep there that night. I wish I had stayed the night in hindsight. It was around 2 a.m. in the morning, and as I said, I decided I wanted to go home to go to bed. The fact that the alcohol had worn off by then did aid in that decision. So I said my goodbye, then hopped into my car and took off down the road. I was heading down a long, dark stretch of a one-lane road with nothing but dense woods on either side, and sparse houses on either side as well. On my way up a long hill, my car suddenly lost power. My car was a standard, so I tried every gear, but there was nothing. I realized it must have been my CV joint going out, so I was stranded. I realized my predicament, but had no other options now, and luckily there were no cars behind me, so I did the only thing I could. I let off the brake and watched behind me as I backed up down the hill. I spied a dirt side road I carefully backed onto, then I parked on the side of it, a few car lengths down. I sat there for a few minutes, wondering what I should do. I had no cell phone, so I couldn't call anyone at the moment, and I had already begun to feel a looming sense that staying there in the car until dawn was a very bad idea. So I grabbed my case that had my game system in it and a makeshift machete I had made from a lawnmower blade from my back seat. Then I got out, locked the doors, and I started off on foot. I hadn't walked about 30 feet to the end of the dirt road and turned onto the highway when I felt very uneasy, like I was being watched by something or someone just out of sight. I knew that worrying wouldn't help my situation, so I pushed that fear of knowing something could be out there to the back of my mind, and I continued on. I decided to walk in the middle of the lane I had been previously heading down towards home. At least if anything came at me from there, I would see it and maybe have time to react. There were only 3 miles, I thought to myself. Only 3 miles. I had gotten a couple of blocks down the road when I felt that sensation worsen. Did I mention that for some reason the night had become eerily silent? Yeah, well, I started glancing behind me and to the sides of me as well. I wasn't about to be caught unaware, I thought to myself, should anything try something. On this road, there were wide drainage ditches with fairly steep, sloping grassy sides that went down about 5 or 6 feet to the bottom before sloping back up into the tree line. Well, a few moments later, as I was nearing the top of that hill, a car came over the top of it, heading in the opposite lane. I watched it pass by, and as I did, the high-beam headlights illuminated the area of the road and the ditch behind me on the side of the road. That's when I saw it. Eye shine. That was all at first. Then, immediately, that was followed by the light passing over a large, hulking creature that the eyes were attached to. An overpowering feeling of dread washed through me. Then, as my eyes took in the sight of this thing, it all happened so fast, but seemed to last a lifetime. It must have been stalking me from the beginning. It was on all fours, one arm stretched out in the front, remaining motionless for a split second. It was colossal. Muscular, defined arms that were long and almost ape-like, with hands or paws like a raccoon's, ending in black claws. It had a head like a wolf, or maybe a German shepherd, only bigger, with small tufts of fur at the tip of its triangular-shaped ears. It was all black, except for its golden, amber eyes. It rose to its hind legs so suddenly, and in one fluid motion, it leapt up into the tree line. It was so fast, yet silent, I had no words, but I did manage to catch a glimpse of a bushy, wolf-like tail as it vanished into the dark woods. It had the lower legs of a wolf as well, with large paws. If I could describe it in one sentence, I would say it resembled the werewolves from Van Helsing. This one was solid black and even more muscular. It must have been 8 or 9 feet tall on its hind legs. As the car was passing further down the road now, I thought now was a good time as any, and though I knew that running from a predator just kicked its instincts into overdrive, I didn't have many other options. I ran as fast as I could for several blocks down the middle of the road. When I felt like my lungs were going to burst, I slowed down, but I kept jogging for a time. My machete was in one hand, and I also managed to hold on to my game system, which was still in its case, believe it or not. I was coming up onto the next long hill at the top now, and walking once more to catch my breath. To my left, I saw a farmhouse down a long dirt road on top of the hill. It looked like the guy who lived there had just pulled up in his truck, and I guess he saw me, because he used the spotlight on his truck to shine it directly on me. I thought about going to him and asking for help, but people around that area often enough would shoot in self-defense, especially a stranger on the road carrying a machete. But I wasn't about to drop it when that thing could still be out there and pursuing me. So I kept moving, starting into a fast jog, now and then looking behind me and to my sides. Just as I got past the bottom of the next hill, I saw the edge of headlights, then a car passing by me in the opposite direction once more. It was a cop car, and I quickly dropped my things and ran to the center of the road, waving my arms, trying to flag him down. To my horror, when his lights passed over the ravine behind me, there again, I saw the beast lying in wait, even closer this time than the last. But this time, it seemed to squint and sneer. Just as I thought I was done for, it slowly but silently went back up into the ravine, then disappeared in the tree line, as if to say to me, I could have had you if I wanted. I was so scared out of my mind, seconds from picking up my machete once more, when the cop down the road wheeled around. He pulled up beside me, and I quickly explained my situation as calmly as I could. As luck would have it, the guy who was shining a spotlight on me had called them, saying that he saw someone walking late at night and that they were probably stranded. The officer agreed to take me home. I asked him if we could check on my car before we did. He agreed. First he patted me down, which was standard procedure apparently. Then we hopped into his patrol car, checked on my vehicle, then he took me home. The rest of that night, I lay awake in bed, fearing the beast had followed and waited for its next chance to finally devour me. To this day, I won't go camping or even out into the woods alone, be it night or day. Never before in my life had I been so happy to see a cop, and I'm so thankful he showed up when he did. Otherwise, I might not be here to recount my encounter with you. Instead, I may have ended up as another missing person who happened to have some car trouble on a long and lonesome road. Even still, I can't help but feel chills when I think about how close it had followed me, how big it was, yet it was completely silent as it stalked me. And number 5, Devil Dog, submitted by DJ. This is my father's story. We're from a very rural place in West Virginia. Today, I own the farm where this took place. It was mid-January, early 70s, and my father was around 13 years old. At the time, there was around 2 feet of snow on the ground. It was about 9:30 p.m., and my grandmother was washing dishes. That's when something caught her eye outside the window, which faces the barn and a road that comes down from the fields and woods. They had one of those dusk till dawn lights on a pole at the end of the road. My father, my grandfather, and 2 uncles were in the living room when they heard, in my father's words, my grandmother let out the most terrifying scream he had ever heard to this day. All 4 of them jumped up and ran into the kitchen to see what was wrong. My grandmother couldn't speak. You could see the sheer terror on her face as she was frozen in place with fear. They kept asking and pleading with her to tell them what happened. After a good 20 seconds, she pointed towards the window. They went over towards the glass pane and looked out towards that old road. Under the light stood this thing on all 4s, like a dog, but much bigger. It wasn't a dog. It turned its head and looked directly at them in the window. It had 5 or 6-inch fangs coming out of its mouth and long, pointy ears. But the worst part, that was the bright, red, glowing eyes. The creature stood there glaring at them from the old road. That's when my grandfather told my uncle to go get the .30-30 Winchester. My uncle came back quickly with the old rifle, and my grandfather slid the kitchen window open, chambered around, took aim, then click. The rifle wouldn't fire. He chambered another round, and again the rifle went click. It didn't fire. Never once for as long as he owned that rifle did it ever fail to fire. The creature let out the most haunting howl. It made all their hair stand on end. Then it turned, went back up the old road, and that's when they noticed that it seemed to walk on top of the snow, as the snow never sank underneath it. When they went outside to look for tracks on the old road, the snow seemed completely untouched, and they didn't find one trace of the creature. In the following year, there were a lot of livestock killed in the area. I ended up hearing this same story over the years, from my grandfather and both my uncles. Each and every time they tell this story, it sends chills down my spine. We were all avid hunters once, and have never seen or heard anything similar to that night. And better yet, that rifle still fires just fine. You're on your way home, walking home from work, unlike you usually do. It's taking a while, and you're approaching a portion of the road where you realize if you take the old backwoods trail, you'd cut your time in half. But there's a reason no one takes that road. There's a reason no sounds of nature ever come from that portion of the trail. So, what do you say? Risk your life to get home 10 minutes faster, or tough it out and burn a few more calories. Good night. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to send me any and all of your scary stories at darknessprevails.org/submit. Currently, I'm looking for stories from sewers, firewatch lookouts, and stories about creepy bosses. If you want to support this channel, look up Spooked on the Google Play Store. It's my app, and you can get all my stuff in one place, and it's free. Or go to patreon.com/darknessprevails and donate $1 a month to get your name in the credits at the end of these videos. Or, if you've got an extra bit of cash, get some Darkness Prevails themed merchandise at morbidmonsters.com. Now then, here are my 5 favorite early comments from my previous full video about 5 creepy campfire stories. Cynthia Barlow says, "Time to sing the campfire song. That title always confused me. So SpongeBob is singing a song, not about a campfire. That's the definition of meta." Connor Reed says, "Aw, I'm not first. Good game, Kieran." Well, Kieran didn't get featured because all he said was something about a spoon. So congrats, Connor. You win this time. Also, what the heck is Ruin the Spoon? Megan Huen says, "Hey Darkness, I've come from Twitter to haunt you. Thank you for actually following me on Twitter. I've only got like 4,000 Twitter followers. So hint hint everyone listening, if you want to follow me on Twitter at Prevails, help me get verified and raise that follower number. Thank you." Kylie Starr says, "I finally got to be the first commenter, but typical Roblox players correct. Still not. I had to feature this comment because Kylie, keep on trying. I believe in you." And Mopaz Machinima says, "Is that the thumbnail of a spooky, scary skeleton with the intention of sending shivers down our spines? They're onto us, Toot Toot. Grab your trumpet. We're going back to the graveyard." Anyways, thanks so much guys for tuning in for another bangin' Darkness Prevails video, I guess. Here are the credits to my patrons who continue to donate because they're freaking awesome. Until next time, stay safe out there and stay creepy.